I guess.
I suppose. Do you want him?
I mean, I know Mason. I put him on.
This week or in the future?
I don't know. I'm gonna check.
We'll take him next week. Absolutely, we'll put him on next week. We don't really have much space.
For 4:30, and
Hey, Brett. Yeah.
Dr. Nelson Mead is the other guest that's going to be with Sally. I just wrote his
Right on
name
top.
in there so you have it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You got it.
Just-
If you could try not to mark it up too much, I've been
I won't mark it up at all.
It's been shared.
Don't crumple it up
I
and
was
throw
going
it
to
away.
say it's been passed around more than I'll just leave that.
A few of them that are here.
Yeah,
Fill in the blank.
exactly.
Yeah, I won't mark it up.
All good. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to do a couple minutes with me before you leave?
Sure. I got them going.
I'll go to this one.
Sure.
I'm really great.
Raphael. You this one? 3. Okay. Sure. Radio Row Day 2, live here in New Orleans. We're surrounded by only the biggest stars, really, and the stars are only getting bigger as the week goes along. Bill had I think a pretty good day from 10 to 2. Lots of guests, just one after another, so that was fun to be a part of. Earlier, we got a couple good guests coming up tonight. Some real legends on the rundown. Solomon Wilcots, and I might ask him about this. I don't know if there are many folks who have done as many hits on Radio Row over the years as Solomon Wilcots has. We're going to talk football with him. Sean Syed, who's been on the show before. Thomas Dimitroff, who is just a tremendous analyst with Sumer, but a former GM as well. And interviewed for the Jets job, so I kind of want to ask him about that. Not necessarily about interviewing for that specific job. I kind of want to know what goes on in these interviews. What are these owners asking? If you sit down with the Jerry Jones or Woody Johnson or one of these nuts, what are they asking? What are they curious about? So we'll talk about that. Joining us at the table right now, lucky to get him, Wisconsin radio legend Bill Michaels is here. He said he had nothing better to do, nothing else going on, I think was the word. Mic number 3. You got
There
it,
you
Bill?
go.
There we go.
There you go.
Welcome, Bill.
I got nothing going on.
It's a pleasure to see you.
I'm homeless. No, you know what? I figured you were with me for 4 hours each and every day, and you know, we have to put up with my crap. So I think, you know, what kind of crap you do me? I'm happy to take it to face.
Do you want to ask me questions? This feels backwards. I don't know how to ask you things. Because
we sit in the car and drive for an hour both ways to come in and out of work every day. What are you talking about?
That's true. We've completely flipped. We've completely flipped the dynamic. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know. What do you want to talk about? What's on your mind today?
I got nothing. You know what? I got nothing. I just walked around. We were sitting here talking about Radio Row, and I for the first time, I've actually just relaxed enough to take a stroll.
Yeah.
And it's pretty full. Day 2. This is as full. It's what a lot of people that have been here, I don't want to say old timers, but a lot of people that have been here many years, have said that this is the fullest it's ever been
on a Tuesday,
Monday, Tuesday, whatever. Because usually it doesn't get really crowded till Wednesday. And so I go and walk around today, and I'm looking at what is here.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be radio and TV stations. That was it.
Yep.
And now there's podcasters, and I get the podcasters.
Bukowski, he's the worst.
But I'm looking like Josina Anderson has something called the, capture concept. And like, well, what is this? And it's a photography thing for people in the business to capture pictures of them working in the business.
Well, that's why you have me. That's why people like me exist, is to take
And
those
I'm
pictures.
like, in other words, it's a person running around with a selfie stick, snapping pictures of you while you're working, and this requires a table and a podcast.
Oh yeah.
You know, and then I see some that are charitable. You know, I see like the Red Cross is here doing a podcast. These are podcasts that have basically replaced traditional radio, broadcast, TV stuff.
Mhm.
And I don't even know if this is for public knowledge, because it was told us on the side yesterday. But I understand that there's a whisper in the NFL that stadiums and teams are being asked to leave suites open for games. So if a podcaster or a quote influencer wants to come experience your game, to have them be available to come to the game for free. And I'm like, so I said, well, what is an influencer? And they couldn't give me the definition. Is it somebody that's got 2,000 followers, 10,000, 800,000?
Cutoff. I want to get in there.
What is that? You know, because, well, you and I, when we're doing the network show every day, we talk to an estimated audience of 6.5 million people total. Now, of that, you take maybe 300,000 basically out of that because you are taking a percentage that listen to sports talk. So we weed it down and weed it down and weed it down. We go to the conservative side and say 300,000 people a day listen to our broadcast. Then you take into account the people that regurgitate it from Spotify, Apple, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and then you take the other side of things where it's Facebook Live, and Instagram Live, and then so are we influencers?
I don't know.
Because if so, I want to go. You and I are going to go on a tour of every stadium in the National Football League.
We're going to promote you.
You know?
Well, it reminds me of like, and you find this in the music.
I know you're an OnlyFans, but
Well,
I don't do that at my home.
That's nice. I can't pull a number on there either. Those numbers are worse than my radio numbers. It's funny because I don't know. You have people who the podcasters, like you said, television. The Threads booth is over there. I think it's just a space where you can go sit down and hang out. So there is a complete and total like wide variety of different platforms. And another thing that I've noticed different from last year to this year, you talk about differences over a longer period of time. The perception of the Packers is still pretty strong this year.
Huge.
But think of the difference between what was being said last year about Jordan Love and the Packers at this time. And people aren't out on the Packers, but a little bit of a different tone, especially with how the season ended the last couple of games. And we're talking to a lot of the same people and asking a lot of the same questions. And, you know, I don't even want to call them criticism. The analysis of the Packers this year is different.
But what you and I are looking to get is outside perspective because we're in it every day.
Correct.
You know, we look at it through either,
Wisconsin glasses or our green and gold glasses, depending on which side of the fence we fall upon, the fandemonium or just the analyst side.
Correct.
So we're trying to basically gauge and say, are we missing something? Because I always try to learn something. You know me, you're always learning. I'm always trying to learn something. I always want to learn something. And so when you walk around, you say, okay, here's a question that I've already answered. You answer it for me. And does our answer jive? And if not, why?
We draw the same conclusion.
So exactly. So it's kind of like when we had the guys on from Sumer Sports over the last couple of days. It was a few differing opinions depending on the analytics. So where is Jordan Love? Either you think Jordan Love is above average, really above average with an unbelievably breakable glass ceiling, or now you're in the question mark category of you're not sure. So that opinion varied. Then when you get to, say, like the Myles Garrett thing, you know, the minute that rumor broke and then it became official. So then some will say analytically, it makes a ton of sense. Look at what LA did getting Von Miller a couple of years ago, and with what they had already with Aaron Darnold and such. That was a team that was ready to win and win now, and they did, and they sacrificed 2 years after to win now.
But they're back.
They're back now.
Quickly.
Yeah. So do you say we have to follow that methodology and get Myles Garrett, bring him in, bolster that defense, build up then either through free agency or the draft, the secondary, and then draft for additional personnel to put around Jordan Love, and there's the play calling and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to see what the perspective is from the outside looking in for what some people think is needed. And the funny thing is, it's a scattering of opinion. So I look at it, and because I'm always looking to see, you know, I listen to the 1%ers that say we're idiots because am I missing something?
Sure.
Or are they just nuts? And
or high on their own supply.
Yeah, exactly.
Smell their own farms.
So I look at all of this and I'm kind of like walking around going, is this what we're discussing kind of correct? And I'm finding out that be honest with you, whether you're a national broadcaster or you're somebody from Tyler, Texas, who is here, the opinions will vary, but the people that have the most educated opinions 99% of the times are you and me.
Well, on our own team especially.
Regarding our own team, because we see it on the daily.
And we're talking about it every day.
Yeah.
For 4 hours. So a point that an analyst might make, it's like, in this, talk about the play action or talk about this. It's like, yeah, we spent probably collective weeks talking about that. To your point, I think this upcoming year, because Jordan Love, we had year one, started slow. It's not a surprise, and then was great. This year had some nice moments, but I feel like the third year is going to be the year where we can draw some definitive conclusions.
One consensus that I found is everybody thinks he was way more hurt than what we thought.
Yeah, or that affected his play. I still think missing as much practice as he did had to affect him too.
Something. There was, it was, as we sat here and discussed it, Mike Golick was talking about it earlier tonight on our show, and where he was saying he didn't move. There were opportunities for him, and Aaron Nagler from Cheesehead TV said the same thing. He had opportunities to run and get out of the pocket. He just didn't. He didn't take it.
Yep.
And whether that's the fear of getting hit and doing further damage to the knee, or he didn't have that capability because they didn't trust it.
Sure.
And Matt LaFleur just put him in shotgun all the time because they didn't trust the twisting of the knee and this and that. I just found that that's the consensus, that he did not have that mobility, and there's something more there that was deeper than what maybe we were led to believe. And we'll probably find out about it. In the next mini camp or training camp or whatever, we're going to hear, yeah, I had to go rehab, or yeah, I was hurt a lot more than, we were kind of leading on or whatever. But I just, everybody seems to think there was something more wrong there than just the fact that the offense was a little bit stagnant.
Which I guess that analysis shows that people still have a pretty high opinion of Jordan Love. Because if they thought Jordan Love stinks, they wouldn't say, well, I think he was hurt. They just say, yeah, that's who he is.
Right.
They wouldn't look to, I wouldn't even say they wouldn't look to make an excuse. They wouldn't look to explain away a year that wasn't as good as many thought it would be, because they just say, yeah, he's not that good.
Right.
But people must still believe in him. Otherwise they wouldn't cite that. They wouldn't talk about the injury.
But even like the people, like former players that still watch the game, it all said the same thing. Like he just didn't move. He's got mobility. He's got athleticism. We saw it last year. And they just got away from using his legs as an asset. And you got to wonder why. Yeah. So to me, I'm thinking, well, maybe it was an 8 to 10 or 12 week injury that still they weren't completely sure. But I just told him, hey, don't get out and do anything stupid, because we don't want you banged up for the postseason. Yeah,
we'd rather have you limited, especially with this running game. Like we'll be able to hand the ball to Josh Jacobs and do 80% of what we need to.
Exactly.
As an audience. Well, I appreciate you joining me.
I got nothing going on, man. I'm homeless.
Wisconsin radio legend Bill Michaels. So what are you going to do until the media party tonight?
Well, Kristen is walking through the door. She just texted me.
Perfect.
So she's on her way in.
Did you tell her you were doing a hit on a big time show?
I said I'm on the air. And she just said, okay. She doesn't know where or what,
She doesn't care.
So yesterday I did some CBS stuff, and I did CBS stuff once, and then I did Saskatchewan, Canada radio.
Are you big up in the provinces?
With the Moose. Yeah, with the Moose. The Moose love listening to me. So, but beyond that, I'm just kind of meandering around. So I got to do some Sports Grid stuff with Pharrell coming up. I think it's tomorrow after I get off the air. And then after that, I'm just kind of hanging out, man. I'm your biatch for right now. So I'm just, if you need me to take the garbage out, I'll take it out. I'm good with that.
When we go to the media party tonight, I'm going to plant my flag. Well, I'll have
that's what I'm looking forward to.
I'll have one beer. I was going to say I won't drink. I'll have one beer because it would be rude not to if there's, and there might not be beer there, but I'll have one drink. Social, but I need a recovery night.
I am going to go take some jiu-jitsu lessons, because now I know once you do the first gin martini, the next gin martini in your hand, I have to karate chop the hell out of you to drop it, to stop it.
It's just delicious. And I guess that's the thing there. You get martinis. They got $2-3 martinis. Well, I appreciate it, Bill. This has been a pleasure.
Good stuff.
I guess we'll talk soon. We're gonna take a break. Rafael Esparza, who was on last year, betting analyst, friend of Ebo, which is how I met him. He's in the green room, so we're gonna chat with him next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Welcome back. Lucky to have a radio titan like Bill Michaels. Difficult to book. Luckily, I know a guy. It's a good way to start the show. Thomas Dimitroff coming up. We're going to have Sean Syed as well from Sumer Sports, who we've talked to. And Solomon Wilcots, who's probably a Mount Rushmore Radio Row figure. So we're excited to talk with those lads coming up later on in the show. Joining us now is, Rafael Esparza. I met you last year because I think you came up to me and said, I'm Ebo's buddy. I know Ebo. I think isn't that how it went? Is that what happened last year?
Ebo texted me and told me to come to your booth and say, hey, there's a guy named Wilson there. I'm like, Wilson from Tom Hanks movie? He's like, no, his name's Grant. And so I came in. That's how we got introduced.
So how did you meet Ebo? Because you live in New Orleans. Last year, I thought you lived in Vegas because you were a betting guy. Or were you living in Vegas?
I live both ways. I have both in Vegas and both here. So my wife lives here probably 80% of the time. I'm probably good 50-50.
So betting analyst, and you go on all the different networks. I was looking at your TV, and you were saying your Twitter, and you'll do prop bets on all sorts of things. We were talking elections last year, I remember. Yep. We were talking random. So with this Super Bowl, it's a rematch. The masses don't seem excited about it, maybe like they would have been excited about the Bills or Jane Daniels and the Commanders. Has that changed the way that the betting sphere has handled this game or taken bets or anything like that?
I think the big money's starting to come in sometime this afternoon. $1 million came in on the Eagles. It was $600,000 on the spread and $400,000 on the money line. So that's usually a trend. So I don't know if that means the Eagle money is going to continue to come in. I think the days getting closer. I think more money we put in. It's been kind of slow. Prop bets have been through the roof. I mean, right now, everything's Travis Kelce over.
Really?
Barkley money came in under. Now is over money starting to come in on that. So I think the money will start trickling in as the days get closer.
I thought the sharps tell us, and maybe this is just in the regular season, you need to bet early because you can get the best lines, or you can find the best lines early before they start to shift because of the money coming in. But with the Super Bowl, as we get closer, there's more money coming in, or big money or sharp money coming in as we get closer. Why would that be?
Usually sharp money comes in late by the sharps. This year was all early. They were just jumping on them early. So I don't know what's the different trend on why they did that this year. Maybe because the books took a beating for the month of December. If you go to every state and say, how'd you guys do in the NFL? They're still crying for what happened.
I think that? Well, I mean, they were on the wrong side of a lot of results.
Favorites and over. So anytime you get the favorites coming in, the books are always going to have a hard month. And they had a bad month all the way through November and December, and even January was not the greatest month for them.
Interesting. So I don't bet. I follow, it's difficult to consume sports content in 2025 and not get some betting stuff mixed in there, even if you're not listening to particular betting shows. You hear, the buzzwords and you hear trends in certain things, but the masses, the casuals, that's such a disrespectful term, but money that isn't sharp tends to lean favorite and tends to lean over. So that's what Vegas likes to avoid. Is that what you're telling me? I'm trying to learn here on the fly as well.
Yes, Vegas. You never want to hear a Monday night football game or a Thursday night football game or game going over, or the national championship game. Sure. Any games, any sport, you never want to see the favorite and over come. It doesn't matter if it's football.
The books hate to see that coming.
Yeah,
interesting. Do you think the sharp money? Look, if you take the emotion out of this and you take out the history of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs always finding ways to win, and you just look at these two teams and the rosters, like Philly's better at most every position. They're not better at quarterback, but Philly's weakness is probably their passing game. And for God's sake, they have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and an awesome O-line. Like, if we were just looking at this objectively, it would be Eagles, right?
Yeah, I mean, they put up 55 points their last game, so it's not like they're like slugging. And the Chiefs, that they haven't been the best team all season. I mean, they escaped a lot of games that they probably should have lost, but the refs made them win. But that garbage. But
you don't buy into that. You don't.
No, I don't buy. No, I don't buy it. I just think if you're looking at defensive point of view, the Eagles had pretty much almost the best defense all season long.
Defense is the balls, man. And they hit hard. That's another thing in that Packers game. Football it's a gladiator sport, and I think sometimes we forget that. And when you see a team as physical as the Eagles matched up against a team like a bunch of the Packers just got hurt in that game because they were getting popped and they were hitting hard. But the Chiefs kind of match that. The Chiefs aren't a finesse team.
No.
Like, they lay the wood a little bit as well. So I think that's a sneaky fun part of this matchup. I wouldn't be totally shocked if this looks like Chiefs Buccaneers a couple of years ago. Does it have that feel to it a little bit?
It does, but I'm majority in this one. I am waiting for the total to move to 50 because I like the under.
Okay.
I think the Eagles want to run the ball. We all know that. We have Barkley, you have Hurts. They're going to want to run the ball and keep Patrick Mahomes on a sideline watching the game, because there's only one guy that can beat you that has a red jersey. That's Patrick Mahomes. Yes, their defense is good. Yes, they have Kelsey, but one guy is the only one that can take the ball in the fourth quarter, less than a minute, drive down and win the game. So leave him watching the game. Yeah, I think that's the reason why I kind of need under. I think the Eagles want to run the ball. And let's face it, the Chiefs, all they do is dink and dunk. They're not a big finesse to a long ball team, so they figure slants, tight ends, wide receivers. I think both teams are going to probably kind of be stallable. I'm not seeing 13-3 like we saw a couple of years ago, but 50 could be a big number.
I would like to avoid that, although 13-3 would probably be great for the books, right? If you're telling me that we go favorites and we go overs, especially if the game goes under by that much.
And the game would be quick, so I can grade my prop bets and maybe we can go to bed in a quick time.
The game would be quick, and also, right, like if everyone's betting overs, you would assume that they bet overs on props as well. So if all those props goes under, I'm not cheering for the books here. I'm just trying to,
basically he is cheering for the books.
I pull for the books. I pull for the shield. Rafael Esparza is your betting analyst. We were lucky enough to have him last year. You're down here in New Orleans. You were giving me some recommendations, some things to do. You mentioned a former, Super Bowl that featured the Patriots where they beat the Rams. What was that, 13-3 or something like that? And you mentioned that the Chiefs don't push the ball down the field. They're not an explosive play offense. I brought this up the Monday after the conference championship games. My lead on the show was, so the Chiefs are winning at the same clip now as the Patriots did. They're advancing. They're making national or conference championships, Super Bowls. But what's really striking me about the Chiefs now is it looks like it used to look with the Patriots. 3rd and 9, we're going to throw a 7-yard slant, and it's going to look easy, and it's going to look maddening to someone on TV who's pulling for the other side because they're not doing anything otherworldly. They're just executing really simple stuff at a high level. And I don't know. We saw with the Patriots for 20 years that's kind of what wins this time of year.
Yeah, and the Patriots then never left points on the field. That's why Adam Vinatieri was a great kicker, and I think both kickers could be key in this one. That's why if this was Washington now, if this was Washington Detroit, I would bet how many fourth down attempts would be made. Bet the over because they never punt on third. But these two teams I think are going to not leave points on the field and probably kick some field goals. So that's another way I'm leaning towards the under.
So you do a lot of analysis, not just on bets that folks would commonly place. You were talking over the break. You have to do referee prop bets tonight. Yes. That's what you're going to be working on.
That's what I'm working on tonight.
We just need to discuss that because that sounds like sicko behavior. Explain that to me.
I mean, it's probably because of the Chiefs. I don't think we would get that much request if it wasn't for the Chiefs.
Interesting.
But I think like over under flags called on the Eagles, over under flags on.
People think there's a money-making opportunity there.
I would think so. Anything that trends on social media, the bosses always want me to try to think of some prop bets. So,
well, that would make sense. Like if people are fired up about it, people are going to want to bet it. I don't know that, like if you would look back through the years, well, you're going to dig into this when you make your bets. Is there that much evidence? Is there any evidence that certain refereeing crews tilt towards Kansas City? Because I feel like you can debunk some of this refereeing stuff.
I always look at it this way. I had season tickets to the Chicago Bulls in the 90s.
Okay.
I saw Michael Jordan play a gazillion times. Did he get calls? Yes, he did. He must have traveled 5,000 times in the game, carried the ball but he was Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Back-to-back Super Bowl.
And Brady as well. And I also think if you're really emotionally watching a game wanting a team to lose, as so many people want the Chiefs to lose or wanted the Patriots to lose, you'll find stuff. Yeah. It's a football game with lots of judgment calls. You know what I mean?
There's holding on every call.
It's seriously
both teams.
And you can slow it down and you can just find stuff. And especially this year, the Chiefs were in close games with everybody. So you can not only find things, but then you can convince yourself, well, the game was so close. That was the thing that decided the game, right? Even if it's not really the case.
I don't believe in all that kind of stuff.
You're a facts man.
Yeah.
I would tend to agree. Who do you like in the game before I let you go?
I'm leaning, if I like defense and under, I'm leaning towards Eagles fly. But at the same time, it would kind of be cool to see a three-peat.
It would be. I don't have a problem with the Chiefs. I think it's kind of entertaining how so many people do. I think it's good for the sport to have a team that's hated. This feels a lot like last year's Super Bowl where, one team is much more talented, deeper, better at every position, but how do you bet against Patrick Mahomes?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we're doing the same thing this year.
Oh, am I going to put money on the Eagles? Most likely not.
Okay.
I will probably, if I get my number, I told you I'm looking for 50.
Yeah.
And if I don't get it, I'm not going to bet it. But I'm looking for the number. But you said, you were at the media last night.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Mahomes, you heard some boos when they and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Charlotte Flair in WWE, she came out yesterday in Raw. She got boos. People like winners, but they don't like winning too much.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to see if the Chiefs continue to win.
All of America was pulling so hard for the Chiefs against the Niners years ago, right?
Yep.
And Jimmy G. And it's just amazing to see how the warm has turned so much. Well, I appreciate it, man. I know you got referee prop bets too, and I'll see you around, I'm sure. But thanks for the time.
No problem. I was glad to see you.
Yeah, you as well, Rafael Esparza. Ebo's boy. Ebo, a little bit of Mr. Worldwide. We're come back, and Solomon Wilcots is going to join us. I think a Mount Rushmore Radio Row figure, so I'm looking forward to this.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Welcome back. It's the Wisco Sports Show. Got a couple more guests coming up. Take a moment to recognize our sponsor, Flipside Pub and Grill. In the cross, appreciative of them always. They've sent us to spring training the last couple of years. Got a couple of broadcasts coming up between March and April. So I'll be back in lacrosse. So I'm hoping to reconnect with some listeners and definitely take advantage of their 2-for-1 happy hour. And I believe I'm there on a Friday. So, yeah, especially because it's in March, I'm going to take advantage of the Friday night fish fry as well. Nightly food specials, not just on Friday, although Wisconsin, especially this time of year, even if you're not Catholic, it is fish fry season. So we can look forward to that. Thank you to Flipside Pub and Grill. Very, very generous with the show anytime we want to do something. So more than appreciative of them. Solomon Wilcots going to join us in just a minute. Bill Michaels joined us to begin the show. Big-time Wisconsin radio host, if you're not familiar, maybe the premier Wisconsin radio host. He had nothing better going on, basically, is what it came down to. I was going to begin the show by talking about the Brewers promotional schedule, which they officially put out today, which I was hoping they would do this week because I wanted an excuse to talk Brewers on Radio Row in New Orleans. And then we talked to Bill to begin the show. So at some point in hour number 2, or maybe at the end of this hour, we can get into the Brewers promotional schedule. And speaking of the Brewers promotional schedule, you know who was here today? Paige Spiranek. I was able to take a picture with her, which I didn't really know how to approach. I'm like, hey, remember when you had the bobblehead thing and that psycho wouldn't shut up about it for a couple of minutes? Yeah, that's me. Can I just have a picture? You don't need to come on the show. It's fine. I just want the picture for the memes and for Twitter. I just want to be able to throw it all over the internet. So funny that on the day, of course, that the Brewers promotional schedule drops, Paige Spiranek, who possibly the biggest Brewers promotion. And I know a lot of people are fired up, myself included. They're scaling back bobbleheads to not every ticketed fan. They're scaling it back now to 25,000 people per game, which we're going to have to discuss. And we'll get into that in hour number 2. Thomas Dimitroff, Sean Syed, both from Sumer Sports, going to join us as well. Excellent football analysts, both of them. And you heard them over the last day or two with Bill. And they've been on the show before. Dimitroff has been. He was with us last year. And Sean Syed over the phone, just like Sam has been. Joining us now, I was joking a little bit with Bill. Solomon Wilcots is here. Solomon, I can't imagine there's many folks who have done more Radio Rows and more hits on Radio Row than you. Like your stat sheet, you have to be a Mount Rushmore Radio Row figure, right?
I think it's becoming that.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. It started, covering the Super Bowl going back to 1998.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first year working at ESPN. That was a Super Bowl that had the Denver Broncos with the Atlanta Falcons, right? I'll never forget it. And been, coming here every year since then. It's been a phenomenal run. And what I love more about it is I get to bring some of my good friends here.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Mead and talk about really innovative treatments that help change the lives of people. Weekend warriors, not just former athletes, not just current athletes, but there are some things that are happening in modern medicine that are changing people's lives.
Well, let's start with that, with the knees, because you know that we're a Wisconsin. I got my Packers shirt on, and I think of a player like David Bakhtiari, who was in his prime and he just can't get his knee right again. Right? We have these athletes who aren't necessarily even at the end of their career who suffer a knee injury, or folks in everyday life who suffer a knee injury, and it just it sticks with them, and it's always a problem. So talk a little bit about the treatments, and Dr. Mead is here as well, so you can add into this as well, but I want to learn more.
I want Dr. Mead to take this because he could talk to you not just about the Macy procedure, because we're going to tell you about that, but how really recovering from injury is not just always a physical recovery. There's also a psychological and a more psychological approach to it in terms of recovering, because an injury is a traumatic event.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And so
I think fans lose that a little bit.
Absolutely. That's why you see players, they're emotional when they're being taken off. They know. So Dr. Mead, help us out. You can tell us more about Macy. First of all, how you go about repairing cartilage damage, but how you help treat patients in general.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of mention the Macy stuff, but it kind of parlays into what you're talking about. It helps also with the mental part of it. But basically what the Macy procedure does, it's been around for about, 8 to 9 years that I've been doing it personally, but it's been longer than that. But essentially what it does is when you have a cartilage defect, or what I like to call pothole defect in your cartilage, the smooth layer in the joint that allows them to glide smoothly. When you have that, typically causes pain, swelling. You just can't get back. Regardless of what you've done, you can't get back because it's going to keep hurting, keep swelling. Well, we only have as much cartilage as we're born with, right? We can't reproduce any more cartilage. And so when people have these defects, it's a nightmare because we can only try to put as good as cartilage in, but it's never cartilage. Well, we've had other ways of doing it before, but what Macy's really revolutionized is that ability to take your own cartilage, send it to a lab, regenerate it, and then replant it into your own defect. And so they've got great, reliable results over the years. It's been fantastic. And it's done well for me, for my patients. And then the next question, though, is how do we take it to that next level in terms of outcomes, especially when you talk about treating athletes, because that's a different level of recovery, right?
Of course.
And performance. And so
you're asking so much more of that cartilage and of that knee once you've replaced it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's what personally for me got me excited about the idea of Macy Arthro. And that is, before, for that second stage procedure, we had to make a big incision about 8 to 9 inches, open the knee up, implant that cartilage, close the knee back up, and it was kind of a daunting task to, especially the patients, to be like, wow, that sounds like a big second surgery. That's a big deal. And so now with Macy Arthro, we're actually able to do that second stage through a small buttonhole incision, to where you could really kind of do it with, so far my experience has been significantly less swelling and pain after surgery. You're talking about, potentially better range of motion right off the bat after surgery, and it allows you to address other issues like ACL injuries. But from a psychological standpoint, you think too, like, recovering from injuries, especially high performance athlete, is as much a psychological event as it is a physical event, right?
Yeah.
There are the guys that just having that, like Solomon said, it's a traumatic event. I mean, it's almost, I hate to diminish what it is, but it's almost like people could have post-traumatic. I mean, because they'll have that fear of feeling that knee pop again. And they've never had an injury before in their life. High performance athlete. This is how they bring money home to their family.
This is how they identify themselves. This is what I am.
Exactly.
This is what I do.
Yep. And that's what all they felt like they could do. And then they're rehabbing, and then in their mind, they get that thought of that knee going out or that knee popping again. And so I think as much as we can do to diminish the psychological effects afterwards, we should, to help improve performance.
Well, and I remember I talked to a sports psychologist here last year. We talked a little bit about that. But, I mean, Solomon, you could speak to this as well. Like, so Jordan Love, we've been talking a lot about him.
Yeah.
And a lot of analysts have said, well, he never really fully recovered. He sprained his MCL in Brazil in week 1, and he had a groin injury later. So if you experience an injury like that, and a month later you're told it's fully healed, like, as a player, what are some of the things that are going through your head? Even though your knee's good and it's been medically cleared or you're good to play, like, what hurdles are you mentally still trying to do?
I think there's a difference too between being medically cleared and fully healed.
Yeah.
There's nuance there. And I think a lot of times when we're watching games on TV, even sometimes an announcer will say, he's back. And, he's good. He's back, ready to go. We take that as if the inference is that he's fully healed.
He's fine.
And no one really said that, but that's the inference, right? Because he's back playing. He must be fully healed. No. These players are playing at 70%. Some are at 60%. Jordan Love knows his obligation, his teammates, his team.
Especially as a
that's also part of the psychology of this stuff that, no one's whining here. We know that's the job, right? That's the job. But those are still hurdles and challenges to being able to play and perform at peak level when it's like somebody putting a 50-pound sack on your back or a 20-pound sack on your back and say, okay, let's go do it. Let me see you jump as high. Let me see you perform the same. Yeah. Well, when you're injured, you're not. To me, we ought to give them credit for the courage, for the try hard, but that's not even how teams do it. They're going to evaluate them the same. And that the fans tend to do the same thing. I can tell you right now, I remember playing hurt, and hey, coach, man, that was my knee. I couldn't quite get, hey, look, are you out there? All right, you got to perform. Yep. No excuses, no explanations. That's what we're told. We know that. But, yeah, when it comes to the cartilage stuff, we just believe, and I think, and you heard Dr. Mead talk about it, Macy is just a wonderful, innovative treatment that now when you can do it orthoscopically, it really is going to help reduce the recovery time. But look, and every injury is different, and you've got to really judge by the person. At the end of the day, you can go to the website to find out more information or find a doctor in your area, Macy.com, M-A-C-I, Macy.com. That's the best place to go.
Yeah, learn more about knee procedures and like cartilage. I'm far from a doctor, as I'm sure you would imagine and understand. But everyone hears, well, when you run out of cartilage, you're out of cartilage. It doesn't simply regenerate. It doesn't grow. That's that's something that most bozos like me even know. So to know that there's progress, let's say, in that area being made is fantastic for these athletes, especially when it's less invasive, because that cuts down on recovery time. And it allows you, like, if your knee is hurt, right? Well, if the recovery time is less and the incision is smaller, you're able to get back to walking or even running faster, which has to be better for your hip, for your ankle, for your calf, for everything else, because the rest of it doesn't atrophy, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the upsides of it too. We can't change the science behind Macy, that what they've been able to accomplish and everything like that. So there are certain times that you have to allow for science to actually work, meaning the cartilage to mature and all that. But the things you're talking about, like, yes, we can work on their quad a lot quicker. We can work on their motion a lot quicker. Things like that I think this is allowing us to do.
Yeah. So you're on Sirius XM, Solomon. Before you guys take off, what have the points been? What have your conversations been as we lead up to the Super Bowl?
Conversation's been in what way will the rematch be different than the first game a couple of years ago? And then I think that conversation starts with Saquon Barkley, right?
Okay.
He didn't play in that game. The Eagles are a much different football team with him, and our conversations with some of their players, mainly A.J. Brown last night, at opening night, he just talked about, we're a running team. We've become a running team. But what that does, it ensures that if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you're going to have to stack the box. You got to pay attention to Saquon Barkley. You got to pay attention to Jalen Hurts. He can hurt you with the legs. That means you're going to get single coverage on the outside.
Yeah.
So the corners are going to have to hold up against really good wide receivers like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. Who's going to be the guy to win against one-on-one coverage and provide the advantage for the Philadelphia Eagles? On the other side, you just can't bring yourself to bet against and go against Andy Reid or Patrick Mahomes.
It's like last year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, the Niners are so talented, but how do you bet against Patrick Mahomes?
And how did that turn out?
Yeah, well, exactly. It turned out like so many of us thought, and we felt silly for thinking it would go any other way.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm so appreciative of your guys' time. Thank you, Solomon. You're
Thank
a
you.
radio legend. Happy to have you on. Thank you, Doctor. Thanks for the
Appreciate
information. Yeah, have a good one, guys. Enjoy the game. We'll be back in 3 minutes. We'll wrap up hour number 1 next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
You want to give this to Brendan?
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Welcome back. Wrapping up hour number 1 of the Wisco Sports Show. Early starting to. It's not Radio Row until you talk to Solomon Wilcots. Solly, as he is known endearingly by so many. And it was cool to meet him and so many other guests last year, and then to have him back this year. And you can watch on the live stream, by the way, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. You see me futzing around with the cameras because Bill only has 6 of them, and I can't remember which ones are which. So I'm trying to get the camera pointed on. Me. You're seeing every inch of Radio Row other than myself at the current time. Here, I'll just use my webcam on the laptop. So in just a couple minutes, we're going to talk to Sean Syed, who's at Sumer Sports, and we talked to Sam and Lindsay last night, who were excellent both on this show and then on my show last night as well. Familiar with Sam, had never done Lindsay before. She was great. Thomas Dimitroff, former general manager of the Falcons, coming up as well at around 5:30. We're talking a little bit about injuries with Solomon Wilcots. Everyone's on the live stream, especially with you, Vagabond John, on Twitter. It's like, if you guys never listened to Radio Row before, they talk a little football, and then, hey, this is what I'm here promoting. Vagabond John's on Twitter saying, these guys own stock. It's called advertising. That's how it works. That's how this whole thing, that's how the world works. Vagabond John. And, it's a fun challenge, right? If a guy is coming on to promote this, that, or the other thing, or talk about knee injuries, it's like, well, think about Jordan Love. How many conversations have we had with guests this week who had some sort of talking point, not just this week, but the last couple since the Packers have been eliminated, as we've done a referendum or a kind of an obituary on the Packers season and why it didn't take off at the end. Well, everyone said, well, yeah, and Jordan Love never really bounced back from the injury, or the injury was still affecting him. Okay, well then, here we have 2 guests. Solomon Wilcots, who played in the NFL, still covers the game, has covered it now for a long time, right? Talking about just that. The idea that even when someone's medically cleared, or they're cleared enough to get back out onto the field, right? The mental hurdle of trusting that knee, really exploding, using that knee or that ankle or whatever was injured. So don't act like it's not germane. Don't complain. I'm here in New Orleans. What, you don't want to hear an interesting guest, a legend like Solomon Wilcots? What? Just because they're talking about a knee treatment? I thought it was interesting. Maybe that's just my intellectual level, Vagabond John. Maybe I'm just about, I don't know why I'm getting so triggered over a Vagabond John tweet. Rob Dog says, let's get back to talking baseball. The Brewers did drop their promotional schedule today. Maybe this is an awesome opportunity to segue and to talk about that for just a couple of minutes. I have a gripe with the Brewers. Well, I have multiple gripes with the Brewers. Paige Spiranek was here today. Another season without bringing her back in any form or fashion, which triggers me. So I will continue to apply pressure publicly on the Brewers, and they will feel the heat that's generated from a regional radio show like myself. This is what we got. Kurt Hogue posting the entire list and a good breakdown with some extra details at the Journal Sentinel, and you should go read his story. We start on Saturday, April 5th with the Brewers Connect long sleeve hoodie. That's a pretty good way to start. I think I like the City Connect. I like the powder blue. Monday, April 14th, Wisconsin Artist Series 414 t-shirt Tuesday, which is odd because the calendar's telling me that that's on a Monday. So there must be some backstory on that I'm not understanding. Brewers replica football jersey, Saturday, April 19th. This is something that I think a lot of folks are circling this one, and I think with good reason. Saturday, May 17th, Famous Racing Sausages cribbage board. That's such a good giveaway. Baseball teams do such a good job with this. This is something that football and basketball, they don't get it like baseball teams get it. And I understand the schedules and the tickets, the live events. It's very different. We're comparing apples and oranges, or maybe something even more different than apples and oranges, like apples and hammers, apples and wrenches, or whatever. The cribbage board is going to hit, and I don't know what that's going to go on the aftermarket, the secondary market, which is basically just eBay. That's one that I think I'm going to try to get. So mark your calendars for that. That's a biggie. Saturday, May 17th, the Famous Racing Sausages cribbage board. I know a lot of folks are excited about that. Saturday, June 7th, big time Jackson Churio replica jersey. I wonder, man, are we really, as Brewers fans, are we really going to be so blessed? What if Jackson Churio just comes back this year and is just a legit star, like we saw it on that? Like, do we just have that now? Are we that lucky to have that? Jackson Churio replica jersey on June 7th. That's a Saturday as well. June 10th, Tuesday night, Wisconsin Artist Series T-shirt Tuesday. Now, that makes sense. That's actually on a Tuesday, unlike April 14th. Not really sure what's going on there. This one I'm going to circle. Sunday, June 15th, Barrelman Cooler for fans 21 or older, which I think is a little ageist, personally, by the Brewers. Kids can put Capri Suns, Kool-Aid Jammers, cans of root beer. But okay, it's a cooler, 21 plus Barrel Man cooler. Pat Murphy bobblehead, the Manager of the Year bobblehead. That's definitely one that I'm going to want to get my hands on Saturday, June 28th. A Brewers 90s replica jersey, Saturday, July 12th. Bryce Terang bobblehead on Saturday, July 26th. That's my grandmother's birthday, actually. I saved a couple of the pictures from the story. I'll throw them up on the live stream if you're watching YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. This Bryce Terang bobble, it's more of a horizontal bobble. That's pretty darn good. That's pretty darn good, and it's the powder blue jersey as well. That's a pretty sweet bobble. I also like bobbleheads that don't include bats in hands, because it just seems like so often they break, or I don't know. I've always struggled with the bats. You lose them, they come loose. I'm a fan of the bat-free bobble. This is what the cribbage board looks like. Again, if you're watching on the simulcast, the famous Racing Sausages cribbage board, sponsored by 620 WTMJ, Wisconsin's radio station. Here's the Pat Murphy Manager of the Year bobble. Yep, that one's going to rip. I'm going to need to get my hands on that. We continue again. I'm reading the work and the reporting of Kurt Hogue. Sunday, July 27th, if you're into such things, Topps cards, a couple baseball cards, you get your hands on those. Saturday, August 9th, a Christian Yelich bobblehead, and I'll throw the picture on the simulcast. This is the last one that I saved. Leaning back after a home run. That's a pretty good pose. This looks more like an artistic rendering rather than a photograph, but that's okay. That's all we have to go on at this current moment in time. We're getting into the fall. Brewers umbrella, Saturday, August 23rd. I like that. Saturday, September 13th. Brewers crew neck sweatshirt. How about that? And then for the first 30,000 ticketed fans, Saturday, September 27th, a Brewers tumbler. Here's a little bit of an issue on the bobbles this year. And this goes back to a conversation that I had with Kurt Hogue 2 summers ago. And I remember Kurt talking about when I grew up as a baseball fan, as a Brewers fan in Milwaukee, bobbleheads were your birthright, right? You would go to a game, and if you were a ticketed fan on that particular night, you would get a bobble. None of this for the first 35,000 fans, which is a silly number because what does American Family Field hold? 41, 42? Well, we're not going to give it to everyone. We're just 35. Well, you're so close. If you're only giving it to half the fans, I guess I get it. At least that cheapness makes sense. But just give it to everyone. First 35,000 fans. The problem is this season, they've gone down to 25,000 ticketed fans, which, look, if you're going to play Oliver Dunn at third base, that's fine. I can look the other way. If you're not in on Bregman, or if you're not in on someone like Ha-Seong Kim, that's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I can get over it to a degree. But bobbleheads for only 25,000 ticketed fans? Like, what are we? Come on. 25,000, that's nothing. You're leaving pretty near 20,000 fans out in the rain if the game is well attended, which bobbleheads on Sundays typically are, and the Brewers draw. So I don't know. I have 2 qualms with the Brewers right now. Actually, neither one of them are roster related. The third base position is one big question mark, but I could look past that if not for the exclusion of Paige Spironic for now the third straight summer or the second straight summer. I'm losing track. And also, if we're only going to do bobbles for 25,000 ticketed fans, like what are we doing? Upset. I'm not happy on behalf of Brewers fans, and I think Brewers fans, in some form or fashion, we need to let the team have it on social media, which I know fans were already doing today. So if you have thoughts on this, you can text in 608-321-1670. A little difficulty getting the texts to load. So as the show goes on, I'll do my best to get to them. Although right now I'm a little bit of a struggle. You can comment on the live stream as well. Rob Dog, like I said, let's get back to talking baseball. Rick, not the biggest fan of that. And Rick is correct. He says it will dominate Grant's show soon enough. We will be to the point very soon where we're just going to be talking Brewers every day. But right now, we're at the Super Bowl. We're in New Orleans at Radio Row. Like, we're going to talk about the NFL. From Sumer Sports, joining us next will be Sean Syed. He is a film guy, and I'm glad that I asked Sam last night about his, I guess, wheelhouse. Like, how do I talk to Sean? What's the best way to kind of break down football with him? And he said he's the film guy. So I really want to get into the job that Matt LaFleur did this year, because I've been saying ever since the end of the season, and especially since Matt LaFleur's season-ending press conference, I've been saying I thought Matt LaFleur really regressed this year. And I like him as a coach. I defend him because I think a lot of the critics and the criticisms from Packers fans are a little absurd. Not all, but some. I just thought he regressed big time as a play caller and a decision maker. But given that Sean is a big film guy, we'll stick with more scheme, and we'll stick with that element of Matt LaFleur's coaching job and performance in 2024, 2025. So we're going to do that next. We'll get a 2-minute update from Zach Heilprin, come back and continue the Wisco Sports Show. Thomas Dimitroff and Sean Syed, both from Sumer Sports, going to join us in hour number 2. Don't go anywhere. Stick around.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, it's game day for the 21st ranked Badgers. They're going to take on Indiana tonight at the Kohl Center. They will do so with one of the hottest players in the Big Ten in John Tonji. The transfer scored at least 23 points in each of the last 4 games, has hit at least 5 threes in all those contests. In fact, he's shooting 56.8% from 3 in that stretch. Yesterday, he was named to the Oscar Robertson Midseason Award watch list, an award that goes to the top player in the country. Coach Greg Gard said Tonji has been an amazing addition to the team this year.
For him to have that type of honor, great. That means, eyes are on our program, and we're obviously winning games, so that's important too. But no, happy for John because he's been a delight to coach. And I've said that several times that, coming in as the 6th year, he could be coming in with all the answers, but he's completely the opposite. He's been really good to coach. He's been fun to be around.
Again, it'll be Wisconsin and Indiana tonight at the Kohl Center. Tip is at 8. Turn to the Bucks. They sat their entire starting 5 last night and getting blown out at Oklahoma City. They've got a couple more road games this week to take care of, at Charlotte tomorrow, and then they're at Atlanta on Friday.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Packers reportedly promoting from within for their new linebackers coach. Sean Duggan was a defensive assistant this past year after coming in with Jeff Hafley from Boston College. He's going to replace Anthony Campanelli, who took the defensive coordinator job with Jacksonville last week. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heilprin.
Check this. The president don't want to come watch us to the Super Bowl. That's right. Guess what? We'll go see him.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Hour number 2, we're in New Orleans. A jam-packed, a loaded first hour. Radio Row legend Solomon Wilcots, Rafael Esparza is here, and Bill Michaels, who, when I brought him on, he said, sure, I'll do it. I have nothing else going on, which I'll take it any way we can get him. This guy from Sumer Sports, Sean Syed, was on with Bill earlier today. Was that a good, productive conversation? I imagine you talked a good amount of the Packers with Bill earlier today.
I would argue it was a productive conversation. I feel like that's for the listeners. They can tell us, did you like it? Did you not? I think it was a good one, talking a little bit about, hey, well, where is Jordan Love at right now? Where does he need to be? Where can he be in the future?
So one of my takeaways is the Packers season ended and we're on the radio every day. I just thought, so Jordan Love, a little bit of a sophomore slump for whatever reason. Maybe some of it's injury related. Maybe some of it was his mechanics, whatever. I can deal with a sophomore slump from Jordan Love, and I can honestly deal with a little bit of a slump from guys like Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks because they're second-year players. So maybe we expected too much too fast. I think my biggest disappointment was probably with Matt LaFleur because he still seems like a young coach because he looks young, but I think I looked it up at the time. It's Harbaugh, Reed, Shanahan, Tomlin, and I think I'm missing one or two, maybe McVay. That's about it. Like he's pretty tenured, and he's coached in a lot of big playoff games. I thought he had a disappointing year. Game management, fourth downs, timeouts, I didn't love, but let's just talk about the scheme. What was the difference this year? Because the offense never really got hot, and it was never really explosive towards the end of the year like last season.
I do think early on in the season, of course, you have that Jordan Love injury. You have Malik Willis playing a bunch of games where,
it was fun to watch.
It was. And
it was fun.
Partially because of Matt LaFleur having really, really good run game designs. And I think as the season went on, you still have a lot of that shotgun run game. We're spinning around in different directions. Josh Jacobs is able to get attacking. Like, I can look at it from a film perspective and say, hey, some of those explosive plays later on in the season, maybe just a touch harder to manufacture. You think about Jordan Love being injured for a lot of the season. Certainly, I think back to that Lions game, the second Lions game, where, early the third downs, you maybe don't have like all the best calls set up. But as you go into the game a little bit further on, you're getting man coverage situations where you can beat the defense. You think about the early game against the Vikings, where you start off a little slow and then it's like, oh, wait, this offense is super explosive. They're able to get back sort of later into the game. So I think overall, I still have LaFleur as one of the top end play designers, play callers in this league. It's rough when it feels like, hey, maybe now you need to patchwork your offensive line just a touch. At this point, maybe, the whole, hey, we have a bunch of receivers that are really good. It feels like you're hoping that we need one to break out. We really need one that can really kind of transform the defense.
Well, and I think, the number one wide receiver conversation, I still don't think they don't need a true number one. And Lindsay was talking about that a little bit last night on this show. She discussed this with Bill too. I think they could get by if the individual, the 3 or 4 guys that they had, proved capable week by week. It's like, okay, if I'm needed to be the guy today, I can be the guy. And I think that was their shortcoming, because they all had opportunities, like Romeo Doubs against the Cowboys last year, or Christian Watson throughout his career. Like he'll be hot and cold. This year, like way too many weeks, we were just left thinking like, okay, there's opportunities, like who's going to grab them? And it just didn't happen often enough.
And it's tough to have that. I think even as a play caller, I don't want to be making all the excuse for Matty LaFleur over here, but yeah, when you're in that situation as in offense and in defense says like, we can just play man coverage against all 3 of those guys. We're just not really going to be afraid of you in those situations. Then I think so much more goes on to, are you designing it at the coach level for these guys to be able to get open? And it felt like, even some injuries at the receiver spot, I think that was pretty tough to get over. And so you're right. You don't have to break the bank to get. I mean, now would I like to see T. Higgins wearing Packers colors? I would certainly like to see it, but it does feel like you still need kind of, I think, everyone to push up just a little bit more to a higher level.
Do you think the Packers kind of hesitant? Part of this is injury related, I'm sure. Do you think they're hesitant to put Jordan Love under center and run really traditional hardcore play action fakes? Do you think that limited their ability to maybe shake defenses and push the ball down the field?
No, I do think it had to be a little bit because of that injury, because it's not something LaFleur is afraid of at all. I do also think because their shotgun run game was so effective with Josh Jacobs. And so when your run game is like that, your play action, you want it to look like your run game as well. So if you're only getting under center to run play action, you're not really running as much from that. I think that takes away a little bit of the ability to kind of pull those linebackers in. So I think a little bit tied to, where Jordan Love was at in terms of, I think it was his knee, it was his hip. I felt like it was the whole entire lower body at certain points this season. So I think we'll learn early on next season where if you're going to be a gun run team, look, the Dolphins have had this problem at certain times, right? Where if that is your real, rushing attack, your play action has to look like that. It may not have the same effect as we all love understanding play action.
Yeah. Well, and when Aaron Rodgers was so good at it forever, and he would run the fakes where he'd have the open hand. And I think they were great at running the ball out of the gun this year. And I think so many Packers fans, like, they had a hard time because it's supposed to be under center and it's supposed to be physical. And it's like, well, man, with all of these actions and motions, they're running the ball really effectively from the gun. I don't know if it sets up their passing game as good as under center rushing does. About Josh Jacobs, were there moments when you're watching Packers film this year where you're circling plays and moments where you're like, oh, that's why they wanted to go get Josh Jacobs so they could do X or so they could do Y? Like, what did you think of year one of Josh Jacobs?
I can think back to week 1 in Brazil against the Eagles where Josh Jacobs is, in that second half or the early kind of second quarter, middle of the game type, you can just run through people's face masks when you have Josh Jacobs. It is incredible to watch that guy play. It is an incredibly physical style. We think about obviously Saquon and Derrick Henry, these guys in new places, but Jacobs absolutely I thought it was a really, really positive year for him where he's able to unlock different things in your offense. And look, he can run from under center. He's obviously not under the center, but taking those handoffs, I think you can have all the play action fakes that you love with Jacobs in there. I think it was a little bit of, hey, LaFleur wanted to have Jaden Reed going behind in motion and you're kind of being funky in that way. I think you have to feel really encouraged with the way that Josh Jacobs was able to perform this season.
I feel like Jaden Reed can do more things that they asked him to do this year. Like, Jaden Reed had a really high drop percentage, and so did Wicks, so did all of these guys, really. Like, Dobbs wasn't as reliable and sure-handed as I would have liked, especially it's like 3rd and 4th down drops. They just smoke you. They kill you. So I'm not trying to say that Jaden Reed is the superstar who should demand a certain number of targets every game, but it's not someone who's running 40 yards down the field. Like, I look at what the Lions do with the Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, why can't you incorporate a lot of those actions for Jaden Reed? I just felt like there would be weeks where we didn't see any of those types of things.
It's tough, right? Because you're thinking from a game plan perspective. It's not like, oh, it's Christian Watson's day, or oh, it's Romeo Dobbs' day. It's also, well, where are the defensive weak points? And the Packers, certainly the season before this one, they were the highest slot target percentage. So you're finding ways to get those kind of crossing routes. And you're right. I think you can have Reed on those. There were so many times where he's in motion behind the quarterback. He's trying to pull a linebacker with his motion, as opposed to, I think, just being that sort of attacking down the field type threat. I think it's going to be really interesting to see just, well, what does the receiving room look like? Because after a certain point, and look, like LaFleur is, again, I feel like comfortable saying that he is a top-end play caller, play designer in this league.
I like him a lot.
Yeah, there's going to be a point, though, where, like, the whole receiver experiment, it's going to, come to roost, I think, a little bit.
Well, and it's such a cyclical league, too. And I think this is why football is so fun, where a team will do something, another team will react to it. And then the defensive coordinators kind of get the upper hand, and then the offensive coordinators kind of get the upper hand. So it's like, that's what's fun about football. And I think LaFleur this offseason now, like, has a little bit of, he doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, but has to figure out, okay, how do we get back to, creating more explosive plays. When they created explosives, they were great because their bread and butter in the running game could kind of move them up and down the field, but you can't move all the way up and down the field for 4 straight quarters, 4 yards at a pop. And I think their inability at times to create explosive plays is probably what did them in. Can I ask you about Jeff Hafley's defense really quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought he was good. I'm excited about the future with Jeff Hafley. I don't know if he was getting head coach interviews, getting multiple assistants poached good. Like, I don't know. What did you think of the Packers defense and what he did in year one?
Yeah, I think I enjoyed watching it from, you think back to the defensive coordinator previously, some of that film, maybe not as fun as what Hafley had. I like that as you got later on in the season, you saw Hafley be more almost expressive with the defense that he's calling, where you're seeing more funky looks, more guys on line of scrimmage and things and that. It did feel like the way that they want to run their defense, really helps to have 4 guys up front that are going to win pretty often. And, unfortunately, as everyone knows, for Green Bay, that's not what the situation was this season. So I'm interested to see, as you mentioned, you get a lot of guys getting poached in a lot of different directions. But if you are able to, maybe early in the draft, maybe through free agency, figure out some of those upfront positions, you're able to you're in a position. Look, in the playoff game, I thought the defense played more than well enough to win that game against the Eagles. That's the unfortunate part. And having, I think, a 4-man pass rush helps you out through the entire season.
Well, and Goody and LaFleur, both in their end of season pressers, are like, yeah, we thought we'd be able to win more with 4. And then Rebervich, their D-line coach, gets fired. It's like, okay, that kind of tracks. That makes sense. And you refer to it as expressive. Like, I thought they got to a point in the season, Hafley did, where it's like, look, I don't think my guys are going to get home. I'm not going to sit back and hope it. We're like, I'm going to send guys. Like, and they did in the Eagles game a couple times. They got burned once, but then a couple of times it worked and they got off the field. And I thought Joe Barry's defense was effective, and that too high kind of static defense can be effective. It's not as fun. It's not as interesting. It's not to say that it can't work, but Jeff Hafley, I think, was a little bit more interesting and a little bit more fun. And I think they probably got to go get some corners now. But I talked with Sam yesterday about Edgerrin Cooper. Like, that's a player that I'm uber excited to watch in year 2 next year. Like, he was a blast.
I mean, seeing him from game 1 against the Eagles, I keep thinking back to that game. He played, I don't know, like 12 or the 20-something snaps like that. And for him to the entire season be a real positive force in the run game, attacking people downhill, that is a role that is hard to fill in this league, as much as linebackers aren't getting paid as much. People think you can just kind of plug and play guys. Edgerrin Cooper wants to play football. Like, that dude always does. I think it's really, really good to have that at the center of your defense. Because, again, like you mentioned, you're going to have to look for corners. We just talk about the line up front. Having, a person in the middle that is pretty solid, I think that is helpful for the team building process.
So what can we look for at Sumer that you are creating?
So we're creating a few things. We have this kind of funky, like, you can look at the film, you can look at the tracking data. We have like 30 metrics for every single player over every single game, multiple times per snap. You can see how fast people are moving. And it really grants, marrying the subjective, what my eyes are, I think they're telling me, with like, this is exactly how effective you are as an edge rusher. So I think we're doing a good job, to me at least, and hopefully people will agree. So. Just giving our scouts, giving other scouts, giving our team clients as well, just another look into it. And then we have this little chat bot. You can go on SumerSports.com, get on our wait list. You want to look up a stat? You want to criticize Matt LaFleur? You want to say you love Matt LaFleur? Go ahead and just type it in. How has Matt LaFleur's offense been? It's been good when I'm writing stuff. It is really accessible for people to be able to go on.
I like that. Anytime that we can make advanced statistics more accessible, to folks instead of just box score stuff and stuff that you can find through fantasy. I think it's great. We get smarter about football. How we use that information, right? That's up to debate for many people, but I just think it's great. Is it lame to end the interview asking you who you think is going to win the Super Bowl?
It's not lame at all.
Okay.
I feel like, so we're, what is it? Is it Monday today, Graham? It's Tuesday.
I can't even start. I
right.
can't.
And so some people are like, oh, you don't have your prediction in yet. You do. I've had it in since Saturday. I think it's Eagles 27. Chiefs 24. I think the way that the Chiefs played against the Bills, where the Bills defense was able to make enough stops, the Bills run game was able to take advantage of the Chiefs defense in the middle of the game. I look at the Eagles defense against the Bills defense. I look at the Eagles run game against the Bills game. I think the Eagles are better in both of those aspects. Now you can do the whole Patrick Mahomes. There's no glory in betting against Patrick Mahomes. Not that I'm placing any bets. I think the parts are there for the Eagles to be able to win this game.
They're just so good. Everywhere.
A beautiful
I watched
roster.
them against the Packers. It's just like
twice.
They're talented. It was weird Packers season. Like they won all their games except for the 2 losses each to Minnesota, like Detroit, and it's very weird. We're very conflicted by the end of the year as Packers fans. Because like, yeah, we won 11 games, but to lose to a bunch of elite teams twice, weird season. Excited to watch Philly and Kansas City. Thank you, Sean, for the time. Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks as always.
Yeah, thanks for the time, Sean. Syed. We're gonna take a break. Come back 3 minutes.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
I was watching you guys with Tice earlier a little
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. We're back here at Radio Row in New Orleans. I think I'm going to have, we were talking about this earlier with Bill, I need to mellow tonight. I haven't been that wild the last 2 nights, but this food, while it's delicious, it sticks with you. I feel it taking a toll on my body. Just one martini. Oh, it's just one martini with a couple of coworkers. That's not a big deal. And it's like, oh, it's only Tuesday. My body feels like it's Friday. So I think I'm going to have a mellow night tonight. Bill and Mike, we're going to go over to Media Night. Joining us now from Sumer Sports, been looking forward to this. Thomas Dimitroff is here, former general manager of the Falcons, longtime exec with the Patriots, very successful. How's it been? How many hits do you think you've done this week so far?
Stopsky will just not stop with me. I think I have like 50 scheduled. We've already done about 35 or something, I think.
Holy cats.
It's a lot.
So you did an interview with the Jets for their general manager position, and I'm sure you've been asked about that. I'm curious, and obviously you're not going to be able to share all of it, but when you're in these rooms with owners, like what kind of things do you guys talk about in these interviews? It can't be as simple as, well, what kind of players do you like? Like it has to be deeper. I'm curious as to what kind of information, what kind of questions these uber powerful, maybe a little ego billionaire owners, like what are they asking? What are you guys talking about?
Well, it's a good point. You have to go and you have to go there prepared, of course. You do have to be able to talk about the roster and you do have to comment on what you would do in free agency. That's one of the main things, you start talking about, hey, you look, you have 10 UFAs here. What would you do with our UFA moves here or whatever, some of the big ones? Talking about that is obviously always going to be important. To your point, there is a lot of discussion about leadership, style of leadership, how you view bigger picture stuff about how you would put together the team. What is your takeaway on offensive and defensive scheme from a GM perspective? How you set up, how your staffing is, what your workflow is. Those are all discussions that take part at so many different levels. And they're also going to go, let's call it the way it is, as a second-time GM. Think about this. As a second-time GM, they're going to go to all of your shortcomings, right? Just because. I've been joking around a lot of people with a lot of my buddies out there who are getting first-time gigs, right? I'm like, hey, man, as small as that is to get that opportunity, it's even exponentially less available, or what am I trying to say? Probability of getting the job as a second timer. When you're a first timer, you can answer all the questions. You can kind of shoot from the hip, and they're like, "Oh, that's a good answer, right? I can run you to the podium." But there's nothing to say. No, I'm going to call you out on that. You say you can do that, but you never did it here, here, and here.
Yeah.
When you're the former and you're going in to get the second time, man, what I realize is they really start drilling down on all the things you'll talk about. You have to have answers for where you messed up. I mean, you guys are Wisconsin. Are you guys Wisconsin guys too? Like, are you guys University of Wisconsin?
I didn't go to UW. I have coworkers who did.
Okay.
We broadcast out of Madison. I didn't go to UW.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, so one of my biggest mess ups in the draft, and I love the guy, was Peter Kahns.
Sure.
So they're going to ask me, what happened with Peter Kahns? We drafted Peter Kahns in the second round. Of course, fine individual. We drafted him the year after we took Julio Jones. So we missed. We doled away a first round pick, so we didn't have it. That was the beginning of a second round of a draft that I failed in. Everyone got cut eventually, right? It was a bad draft for us. So I get a lot of people asking me about that. They ask me about what happened with Dan Quinn in the end of your time. You guys had a great 5 years together, and then you tailed off. They always want to know what happened when it was, acrimonious or animosity set in, right? Those last years when it gets hot, year and a half, 18 months, usually that's what it is. Those are the tough times that people are asking a lot of questions. So it is a big overview with especially the leaders. I will tell you this, the last thing. I thought coming in as a potential second-time GM that they were going to move through about 75% of the stuff that they already knew. Hey, you can handle that.
Yeah.
But they did go back to the beginning, and they wanted to hear my opinions about all that stuff. I'm like, why don't you go to the last three-quarter here and figure out what can we do to create all off of what you've established. And that's just not how it necessarily is.
So something I was talking about with Matt yesterday, I was excited to ask you, why is it harder to get a second general manager gig when we see retread coaches happen all the time and they're successful? I think, especially now with what happened with Dan Quinn, I know McCarthy didn't get a job, but I think maybe the worm is turning a little bit to some organizations thinking, you know what? He failed before, but I'm seeing retread coaches happening a little more often. So why does that not necessarily extend to GMs?
So I have a few different thoughts about that. One is, as a head coach, Usually an owner knows his head coach's personality, right? They know that if it's a player coach and the guy doesn't work out, well, we need to come back next time and get a hard-ass coach in there that's going to be driven and accountable, et cetera, et cetera. They don't do the same parallel with a general manager. If an owner has a general manager who's like, he's an upbeat guy and he's very involved in this and this, they're not going to get the opposite of that the next time they hire a GM. They just don't. They're not dialed in on that. That's one of the things where coaching it is, of course.
Sure.
I do struggle thinking about it. It seems like it's one of the few industries out there. Every one of us who have time, I'll talk to all the former GMs and the former head coaches. I would be exponentially better coming back the next time because I have so much experience to draw from. And it's just a little surprising that that's overlooked in the NFL for the most part. There's a few of them. Trent Baalke got a second chance eventually, but he was in the building when it happened. What I feel is very few of these owners are going to go outside their building and take a former, right? You're tied to certain things, and in their mind, they might look at the list and say, oh, there's Thomas Dimitroff. Yeah, no. Just because it doesn't feel right to them for one reason or another. And so it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in the future.
It's a great point. Like, wouldn't they be better the second time around? Because especially when you're interviewing a guy and you're asking about mistakes and they're explaining the mistakes and what they learned from the mistakes. And yet I think for general managers or for executives, unlike coaches, it's held against them in a weird way. Do you think the NFL has trended the wrong direction in terms of players, or not players, but coaches and general managers being hired together, or a high-level coach given a job, almost being enticed to take a job, saying you can bring your own guy, where it's almost coach and general manager working hand in hand rather than general manager above the coach? Like, hasn't that hierarchy changed a little bit recently?
Yeah, it has. I mean, it was really interesting to watch what they did at the Jets. And I feel like, as you remember, and you heard Mike Tannenbaum and Rick Spielman were in charge of that search. And they were playing this not game, but they were working it, right? Hey, let's see. Okay, this guy can be here. Mike Vrabel was really interesting to them, at least ostensibly. And then he leaves, and all of a sudden it switches a little bit. And let's see if we can get this GM. And then if this head coach is around, they were playing that whole syncing, sort of seeing how it can all work together. I think it's important. I have never in my mind thought it was going to go in that direction where everyone was hired first, before the GM sat down, right? When that started going that direction, it went that way with, Jacksonville, right? That's a little bit different for me. I've already been there 13 years or 13 drafts and free agents, 12 and a half years. I never in my mind thought that I would ever consider taking a job if I were to come in and I'm not just saying it's light because you're coming in second. If you came in and they had hired the head coach first, and you came in and they said, you have 53 and you have final say, but I don't know how you pitched that to the new head coach.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So it becomes complicated. And this whole idea of, again, signing before is just, again, I think there is a reason for it at times, every once in a while. I hope that it doesn't become the future. I'm worried about it.
I think there needs to be a hierarchy. You want to, of course, hire a general manager and a coach that have shared values and ideas, right? But I think, like, what happened with the Raiders, and tell me if I'm reading this wrong. They had Telesco. I think Telesco had done necessarily a poor job, but I saw that and I heard others talk about it. Tell me if I'm wrong. Well, they moved on from Telesco to make the job more appealing to a potential coach because they could hire a general manager specific for that coach. That guy could bring that guy along. And I just think that's a little shady. That's the guy who's selecting your players and handling your money, and you are making a decision on that guy to entice a coach. That just seems like bad business to me.
It's a tough one for sure. I keep thinking about how we're going to pull that off, and that was one that I was always confused about. Again, Tom Telesco is a good football man. If you talk to the people that know him now, I know you can. If you dig into the Charger fan base, they're going to do their deal, which happens a lot of times. I understand that. I don't know, man. I think there's so much to talk about with this and the future of it. The other future that's happening right now, you saw it with Tony Boselli. I think there's going to be a bigger run given this situation. There's going to be a bigger run with the president of football operations, not the president of the entire organization, like Tony Boselli, like not Chris Spielman, because that's not really his spot there. But Chad Brinker at Tennessee. They're going to be over top of the head coach and the general manager. So I think in that case, you can do this situation. That's what's going to be interesting. One thing I would say, and I've been very outspoken about this, and I would not say this if you're talking to Tony Baselli because I don't want to take money out of his pocket, but I believe that to make that truly work, for the head coach and the GM to trust the president above them in that situation, I think you need to tie that presidential contract to the success somehow, get creative to the success of the two guys that are running the football program.
Yep.
If you're those two guys and you don't trust that guy up there, it defeats the purpose of being in it together and sharing some really good information and profundity on football.
Sure.
Versus, hey, the guy comes around. I was imagining this. If you're not in lockstep and you don't trust the guy and he's the president, you're like, Bobby's coming again. My God, let's just not tell him anything. And they close the door and they're like, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be that way. You're doing this to make sure that everyone thrives and makes the best decision. So that's what I believe about that.
Thomas Dimitroff is here, Sumer Sports, former general manager in Atlanta, really successful exec in New England. In those interviews, just to go back to that, you were talking about the interview with the Jets, when they say, well, what'd you do with this pick? If you were being honest, wouldn't you just tell the manager, yeah, sometimes you miss on draft picks? Like, it's baked in, right? It is kind of that simple, but I suppose that can't really be an answer that you give.
Well, I think, the questions about Brock Purdy from owners like that, like why did the NFL miss on Brock Purdy?
Sure.
And my point could be on Brock Purdy was, did they miss? Or was it just one of those things like Tom Brady? Is that a miss? Well, why didn't, someone should have gone up in the first round. I get that. But if no one's doing it, and wisdom of the crowd is stating, you can wait. Why am I utilizing a pick on someone when again, wisdom of the crowd is he's going to be a 6th round, 7th round person. I think it's playing it smart. And I think you always, back to the answers to the owners, they're going to have all kinds of interesting questions like that. And you can't get defensive with them, to your point. I think you're right. That's probably it. Hey, I missed. I raised my hand on Vic Beasley. Like, I think Vic Beasley was an unbelievable talent coming out. Talent, athletic, ripped up, never partied, anything like that. But he was lacking in true football passion. We knew that, and we overlooked that. We didn't overlook it. We thought we could improve that. He won the sack record in that first year he came in, and then he tailed off.
Yeah.
I raised my hand there. Ultimately, that has to be my decision. Dan and I, we did it together, but my job was to make sure we bring in the right pass rushers. And by the way, there's some black hole, pass rush black hole over the Falcons. Not just when I was there. It's still happening now.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like they're still trying to get that right.
It still is. It's happening. Definitely. And and sometimes you're like, what'd you do with this pick? It's like, okay, well, look at the 10 players that were picked behind that player. Like, sometimes you miss and it's obvious, and you miss on a stud who goes right after.
Well, we used to put together a really cool document for Arthur Blank for that. It was why we would and why we wouldn't.
Sure.
So all the 10 in front, we had reasons. We were like, this is why. And some, they weren't defensive. They were just educating. And then the ones after, we'd do whatever we'd do to comment on them. Just, it helps an owner get an idea of why there's movement around those players.
So one more, I'm sure you've talked about this week, but Packers fans, we romanticize, the last couple of Super Bowls. Reggie White leads to the Super Bowl in the 90s. Charles Woodson is signed. They win in 2010. For the sake of this conversation, let's say that they recover an onside kick, make a Super Bowl in 14. Julius Peppers would be thought of in that same way, that edition, right? So now Myles Garrett is available. I'm trying to figure out a way that Max Crosby springs loose. Khalil Mack is a free agent, right? Are we in an era now in the NFL where teams maybe like the Rams or your trade with Julio Jones, teams that think they're close, they're a little bit more willing to do that? Because I look at teams like the Rams or the Eagles who gave up picks to get someone like A.J. Brown. It doesn't really come crashing down years later if the organization is run well, right? Like, you can absorb losing a pick or losing money in free agency if you're run well.
Yeah, and I sit there and I think about what's going on, in Cleveland. That's a big deal for Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. A tough decision to deal with the whole thing. One of the things that's come out in my discussions is if you have a quarterback in place that you believe is going to be there for the next 10 years, I think you're much more apt to make a move like this trade with Cleveland potentially, where it's going to cost you a 1, 2 1s, and a 3 maybe. If you're a team that doesn't have a quarterback and you're doling out 2 1s, oh my God, and there's not a real legit free agent out there, and that's tough to do. I don't think that team can do that. I think it's the team. That's why this keeps coming back to, does Dan Quinn do that? Because they're so teed up right now with Jaden Daniels. Is this the right time? And I think they have about $100 million or $90 million in space, if I'm not mistaken. where is Green Bay on that level? Like what's their cap space right now?
It's fine. Like it's good. They could make it work, with extensions and stuff. They're in the healthiest cap spot they've been in a couple of years, just because Rodgers is coming off the books, Bakhtiari, like some of these, they did what the Saints did with Breeze, except they stopped, right? The Saints were still doing it. So they could make it work. I think Goody, when he talked about it at the end of the season press conference, he said, it's time to try to win championships, right? He was very direct about it, but when asked about trading first round picks, he didn't really push back on it from we need the picks. It's you're giving away a very nice contract from a young player and years of control. I think that's the hesitance that's a player who we don't have to pay much for 4 years. That's what you're giving up.
It's a good point.
That's the opportunity cost. Well, I appreciate it, Thomas. I love your stuff at Sumer. Thank you for the time. I know you're doing show after show after show, so thank you for being generous.
Always enjoyable.
Yeah, we'll be back just a couple of minutes.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Rolling near the end. A couple really good guesses. Someone complaining on the live stream. I don't want to fall into this trap of reacting to everyone's comments, although this week is a little different because we're not taking phone calls, right? So my one form of communication with you this week is comments on the live stream. And if you're watching YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, maybe you're able to see, maybe not. I got a comment from this guy, from Chris. He says, it's only Tuesday, and I'm ready to file for a restraining order against Solomon Wilcots and Sumer Sports. Okay. First of all, it made me laugh. So, look, you don't want to hear them talk about knee injuries. Okay, that's part of the thing at Radio Row. Thomas is awesome. How often does a schlep like me on a show like this, not to offend you all, we're schleps. How often do we get to talk to someone who's been a general manager in the NFL and been a general like at a really high level? Like, he had an awesome run with Atlanta, right? And an iconic move, trading for Julio Jones, was the one with the Huevos to pull that off in a time where, like, people traded draft picks. People have traded draft picks for a long time, right? The Vikings giving up all of those picks for, and now I have a brain fart. Sorry, I'm sleep deprived. Was it Emmitt Smith, or which back was it? Like, teams used to give up plenty of draft picks to go get players, right? I think more recently, we've seen teams, especially for quarterbacks, with a little bit more frequency, dealing picks to move way up. Like, I'm going to go way up and get Jared Goff. The Rams did that years ago. Or the Eagles with Carson Wentz. I can't remember if they jumped or like how far they jumped, but teams have done this, right? To do it for a receiver back whenever Julio Jones was drafted, like, you just didn't see moves like that a whole lot. So the opportunity to talk to a general manager, to hear what those interviews and those conversations are like. And I was talking about this with Matt, who you saw sitting on the simulcast next to Thomas, who works at Sumer and helped us get some folks from Sumer and from Pro Football Focus last year, really helped get some good guests on our show between Bill and between my show the last 2 days. I was talking about this with him yesterday. Like, it is funny to me how so few general managers are hired a second time, even if they're considered successful. If they stink, why would they be rehired? Okay, so that much is obviously, but good general managers who have a good run, whose time comes to an end for whatever reason. We say this with coaches all the time. Still think they're a good coach. Sometimes it's just time, right? Sometimes you need a different set of eyes. Sometimes you need a different point of view. Sometimes you need a different message. Well, why can't all of those things also be true about a general manager? If the GM stinks, of course they're not going to get a second job. Why would they? That's nonsensical. But so many coaches are fired, or in the case of the Cowboys, like, really truly let go this last year with McCarthy, but more typically they're fired with, a year or two left on their deal. It's like, great coach, just, it was time, right? And lots of smart football people have said the window for a coach for their message is about 8 to 10 years, right? And certainly some coaches have beaten that, and they've coached at a high level and achieved a lot for a long period of time. But we understand that to be true of coaches. Even if you're a great coach, sometimes your time just ends in a certain spot. But we don't do that with general managers, and I don't necessarily get it. And I think Thomas's point was a good one when he's going into these interviews and he's having to talk about some of his shortcomings in his first stint as GM. Like, wouldn't a general manager be smarter? Wouldn't a general manager, a smart one, learn from those missteps and learn and say, okay, well, given a second attempt to do this job, I now have the wisdom, I now have the experience, I now have the knowledge to maybe do this a little bit differently. And it would drive me nuts. And I'm sure, Thomas isn't going to openly talk about this, but I'm sure as he's laying in bed at night trying to fall asleep or when he's in the shower, that's when I do my best thinking, right? When he's being asked, hey, why did you take, Dick Clark in the second round that one time? If I was in that interview, deep down I'd be thinking, okay, so I pick 7 or 8 players every single year. Think about all the great players I picked, all the great deals that I moved, and you want to know why, Harry Hobnob in 2014, like really? The answer is because sometimes draft picks don't hit. It's a probability thing, right? Like you're playing the odds. No general manager's going to hit every single pick. A lot of the draft is a crapshoot. You want it to be a well-informed crapshoot, and you want to have good process and sound process to control as much of that crapshoot as you can. It's just like blackjack, right? You want to have smart process, and you want to flip, smart cards, and you want to make smart plays, but there's still an element of luck. So to go into an interview with an owner and be like, well, why'd you take, I don't know, why'd you take Rob Smith? It's like, really? Well, okay. Well, what about the 10 players that came after Rob Smith? Was there a TJ? It's not necessarily like Kevin King, TJ Watt, right? Now that miss hurts a little bit more because you passed up on the opportunity to take someone who turned into an absolute, no doubt superstar. But I think of the Eric Stokes pick, and I'll pull up the 2021 NFL draft because I think this is a good example. Because I look back and I think, man, Eric Stokes never really turned out. He was good as a rookie, and then he's been hurt, to be fair, of course, but he hasn't really been a player that's contributed at a high level. Well, if you go look at the end of the draft that year, so Eric Stokes went at pick 29. The players that went right after, Greg Rousseau, good defensive lineman, not a superstar. Odafe Owe, kind of a long line of edge rushers or defensive ends for Baltimore who were good, not unbelievable. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who I'm shocked that Goody didn't take him because he's the exact type of tools the edge rusher. Tyson Campbell, Elijah Moore, who was later traded. I don't even know if Elijah Moore's still in the league. Javonte Williams, that's a good back, right? But the Packers in 2020 had just taken A.J. Dillon. And at this moment in time, they still had Aaron Jones. I can't remember if Jamal Williams was there at the time. Like they were set it back. Okay. Javon Holland, safety. Landon Dickerson, center. Okay, there's a real player, right? But my point is, if you look at the 5 or 6 picks, and if you look at the next, Christian Barmore's in there. But so is a player like Tevin Jenkins, who's mostly been poor, Richie Grant, Levi Onwuzurike, Detroit, Liam Eichenberg. Like, there's not dozens and dozens of better options behind it. So it would be so difficult for me to be a general manager in the spot of Thomas Dimitroff. Like, I was excellent. I was great at my job. Should have won a Super Bowl if Matt Ryan and Kyle Shanahan had just made a couple more plays down the stretch. And now I got to go into interviews and ask why I picked a certain player or did a certain thing. It is interesting. It's very interesting to me. I was excited to ask him about that. And he kind of got on the topic before I even broached it with him. Like, yeah, it's especially hard for a general manager to get a second crack. I think there have been plenty of good general managers. Telesco was one. Was he unbelievable? No. I think of the work that Reggie McKenzie did with, at the time, the Oakland Raiders. It wasn't perfect, but that's a dysfunctional organization anyways. Put some real talent on that team. It was like, back then, it's like, man, Derek Carr, this team seems kind of nice. And then he phased out, and now he's like a 3rd or 4th race scout with the Titans. I'm not saying that Reggie McKenzie should get another job. I'm just saying there have been plenty of general managers who have lost their jobs, fair or unfair, just as head coaches would lose their job. And we don't really apply, the NFL, I should say, doesn't really apply the same standard that they do to general managers and coaches. It's just interesting. That's it. I don't know why. I don't know how. It's not like a general manager is an especially sexy thing. Like a coach, you need to hire someone to, I think, give the fan base a certain feel. Right. And that's why retread coaching hires can be a little difficult. That's why Dallas, Mike McCarthy's a good coach, but I think Cowboys fans were a little underwhelmed. Just like on a different level for a different reason, right? It's also true of Brian Schottenheimer. But think of an opportunity where any retread hire has been made. There's a certain sales job that the team has to do to get that fan base to accept the coach. And the coach is a public-facing, speaking with the fans, speaking with the media, public vocal leader of the team. Okay? General manager's not that. You know what I mean? Half the time when general managers are hired, fans go, who? Like when Brian Gutekunst was hired, we all thought it was going to be Elliot Wolf. We all figured it would be Elliot Wolf forever. Brian Guda, who it now? Right? Like so many of these guys we don't even know, and then we forget about them once they're hired. So I could understand, again, a team wanting to avoid a retread head coach, because how's it going to play with fans? How's it going to play? Had the Bears hired Mike McCarthy, for example, I think Mike McCarthy would have been very good for the Bears. I don't know if they're winning a Super Bowl with Mike McCarthy. The odds would tell us no, because very few teams actually win Super Bowls, let alone the Bears. But I think McCarthy would have been a nice stabilizer, and I think he really would have raised, if nothing else, the floor of the Bears. I think it would have been great. But would Bears fans have jumped out of bed in the morning thinking about that hire? No. Because it's Mike McCarthy. Oh, this guy, right? He's been around. We know his deal. There's no new. There's no exciting. There's no discovery, right? I think some GMs and some owners like the idea that we're going to discover a guy. We're gonna identify our own guy. We're not going to take someone else's sloppy seconds. With coaches, I get it. General managers, I really don't. I know I'm waxing poetic on this point that, it's just a small little thing from the Dimitroff interview that we're picking at and that we're kind of going back over. But I do think it's odd. I think it's weird. I'd hire Dimitroff to run my team. A lot of teams would. Like Trent Baalke gets another job. And I wasn't going to ask Thomas to badmouth Trent Baalke. The dude's a politician, right? He knows how to cozy up to the owner. He knows how to tell the owner what they need to hear, which is why the Packers ownership structure is just the balls. We don't need to get into that whole thing. Let's take our final break of the show. We'll come back. We'll have about 7 or 8 minutes. I'll get to some of your texts and some of your comments because I miss being able to take phone calls. That's what makes sports radio great. 608-321-1670. Shoot me a text, comment on the live stream, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. 3 minutes, and we'll come back, wrap up the Wisco Sports Show Day 2 from Radio Row next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Last couple minutes of the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Twitter at Wisco Grant. You can text, call the show. Text, of course I have it. Not call the show this week. We're live at Radio Row in New Orleans, thanks to Flipside Pub and Grill. They're food and fun without the franchise. Home of the 2-for-1 happy hour in La Crosse, just across from Menards. But you can text. Starting with Cone. Says, I never want to hear you complain about load management in the NBA ever again. You're load managing radio now. Why? Because I had Bill on? He was sitting right here. What am I supposed to do? Wisconsin radio legend. What am I supposed to do? Not ask him to come on? That's not load management. It's not like I went to the bathroom and let Bill do my show. Bobby in Menominee says, if there's holding on every play, then call holding on every play until they stop holding. Damn it. That's my issue with sports fishing. That's such a bad take, Bobby. I don't like that take. I want fewer flags. I want fewer everything. They should not call more holding to legislate it. That's not, I don't want to do that. I don't even like reading that. County Mike says, Grant, how's Nolans? He spelled it. My worry about Matt LaFleur is growing since the season ended. Okay, well, first of all, that's funny because nothing's happened, Mike. But that's why we love sports radio is we have to talk for 2 hours every day and we can get ourselves to change our opinions even though no football games are being played. From changing out staff to rearranging of staff, extending Bisaccia, losing Campanelli is big. Stenovich could be moving on, unable to improve execution and correct repeated mistakes all season. With a new Packers CEO, my guess is Matt LaFleur has to make this year count. Otherwise, ... He's got to make this year count. Every head coach has to make every year count. That's true of every coach. Now, it might be true to a greater degree for LaFleur, but I keep saying this every time folks say, like, this is a big year for Matt LaFleur. It's a big year for every NFL head coach every year. Now, there's different degrees, right? I don't think Matt LaFleur's on the hot seat, but if he has a down year next year and struggles with, let's say, schematically, I think they struggled schematically, but you could also make the argument that in a lot of these big games, they didn't show up ready to play. You can hang that around the neck of the coach, whether it's fair or not. That's how it works. Game management from a fourth down decision-making standpoint, I thought was poor. Play calling on fourth down was poor. Like, I just thought Matt LaFleur had a down year. So, yeah, he's going to improve next year. But there's no coach in football, save for maybe Andy McReed. Why did I say McReed? Andy Reid and Sean McVay. I was combining the two. Other than that, it's a big year for every head coach. There's not a head coach in football where fans are thinking, well, even if next year goes down the tubes, they're fine. They're a great coach. No one's saying that. No one would ever say that because it's the NFL. So, of course, it's a big season for Matt LaFleur. It's a big season for everybody. But I'm not so naive and I'm not such a homer to think that, yeah, maybe it's a little bit more important for Matt LaFleur than it would be for some others. I think that's a good point, County Mike. I think the new president taking over is such an overrated talking point. Ed Policy's been here forever. Eric on I-90, who people always point this out in the comments and on the text, like, some of the best Packers takes on the show come from Eric, who's a Vikings fan, just because he has a view from 10,000 feet, right? From 10,000 lakes, Minnesota fan, right? He always refers to the Packers organization going all the way back to Ron Wolf. And I think it's clever. He refers to it as the 3-ring binder. They pass the 3-ring binder down, right? From GM to GM, from coach to coach. And there's this great continuity, right? From era to era. I think that's true from Mark Murphy to Ed Policy. Like, I don't think Ed Policy is going to get in there. No, I need to get my guy. This is his guy. These are his guys because they're Packers guys. They're the way that the 3-ring binder would say to do it. These types of guys that you would cite in the 3-ring binder going all the way back to the early 90s with Ron Wolf, because that's just how this works. So I think that's a really overblown talking point. I don't think much is going to change with Ed Policy there. I don't think much is going to change at all. And I also don't think the draft being in Green Bay has any bearing on what they're going to do with the pick. And that keeps coming up. It's come up a lot. And I just think it's silly to think, well, they'd trade for Myles Garrett. They'd trade for Max Crosby. But they're hosting the draft in Green Bay. So they don't want to give up that pick. They need to read a name Thursday night in Green Bay. Man, I think fans would get over it. And also, I brought this up with Andy on Pack-A-Day 2 weeks ago or so, last time we chatted. folks who are willing to drive to Green Bay to stand in I don't even know where they're holding the draft. Technically, we're going to learn more about that in the coming weeks. We talked to a Packers exec yesterday who's telling us they'll bring out the renderings and we'll really kind of start to pick up on that once the Super Bowl is done. I don't know where the draft is going to be, but there are folks who will drive from far and wide to go stand and listen to someone read names off a piece of paper. And I don't think that folks that are willing to do that will turn around and throw a fit. Well, I thought they were going to pick someone. Man, you did not get in your car to drive from wherever the hell, fill in the blank town, Toma, to Green Bay, expecting anything other than, we're just going to go check it out. It's going to be cool. Because that's what going to the draft is. It's nothing more than that. So the idea that the Packers have to cater to the crowd and it's in Green Bay, got to pick someone. I think it's a very overblown talking point. And I believe the same about Ed Policy taking over. It's the 3-ring binder. Shout out to Eric on I-90. I think that's one that he gets right. And I also love the turn of phrase. I think it's very clever. So I'm going to continue to use it, but I'll credit Eric. I can't take credit for the 3-ring binder. I think that's very clever. So tomorrow we'll keep it going. I want to get Mike Renner on at some point this week. I want to get Ryan Glasspiegel, who's had some awesome reporting on the Fox Super Bowl booth. That's coming up this week. Until we talk tomorrow at 4. Thank you. I appreciate you listening always. Talk to you tomorrow.